What if the thing quietly wrecking your future isn't your paycheck, your rent, or the price of eggs, but a story you never chose, planted in your head before you even knew what money was? A wave of new behavioral research is pointing at something uncomfortable. Most people who budget carefully, track every expense, and genuinely try to do everything right still end up nowhere near real freedom. Not because they're lazy, not because they're bad with numbers, because they're chasing a picture of success that was designed by someone else for a completely different purpose than their own peace of mind. Think about it. Somewhere along the way, looking like you made it quietly replaced actually being free. And once that swap happens, you can work incredibly hard your whole life and still end up trapped in a beautifully decorated cage. To understand how deep this goes, picture 4 people. Different decades, different cities, different paychecks, but somehow the exact same invisible wound. Ethan is 23, sharp with money in a way his grandparents never were, building a small online following while investing in index funds on the side. Jason is 37, a project manager who spends his weekends chasing sunsets in new countries and calls it living. David is 51, a regional sales director who worked his way from a cramped studio apartment to a 5-bedroom house with a 3-car garage. And Daniel is 69, retired now, sitting in the same house he bought in his 20s, technically a millionaire on paper and quietly terrified underneath. 4 completely different lives, one shared trap. This isn't a story about people who made careless mistakes. It's about how culture, generation after generation, hands us a script for what doing well looks like, and how almost nobody stops to ask whether that script actually leads anywhere good. Let's start with Ethan, because his version of the trap is the newest and, honestly, the strangest one yet. Ethan grew up with a phone in his hand and financial influencers in his feed before he even had his first job. Unlike older generations, he genuinely understands the mechanics of money. He knows what an expense ratio is. He knows compound interest isn't just a phrase, it's math that works for you or against you depending on how early you start. At 23, he's already automating $60 a month into a simple portfolio, and he talks about it proudly online, filming little clips about his investing journey. Here's the twist. In that same month, he'll often spend 4 or 5 times that amount on a new phone case, a trending skincare set, a productivity app subscription he barely opens, and a slick desk setup for his home office that mostly exists to look good on camera. None of these purchases are evil. Individually, they're harmless. But together, they form a pattern where the appearance of financial wisdom is being funded at a much higher rate than the actual wisdom itself. This is the sharpest, most disguised version of the trap because it hides behind genuine literacy. Ethan isn't ignorant, he's performing. He talks about financial independence with real fluency, while his spending habits quietly work against everything he's saying. It's not a lack of knowledge causing the damage here. It's a mismatch between his public financial identity and his private financial behavior, and that gap is exactly where wealth quietly leaks out. Now picture Jason, and a completely different flavor of the same disease. Jason stepped into the job market right as the 2008 financial collapse was tearing through the economy. Homeownership, stable pensions, the whole traditional ladder his parents climbed, all of that got yanked out from under his generation almost overnight. So millennials like Jason adapted. If owning a home or building steady equity felt impossible, why not redirect that energy somewhere that felt earnable? Culture answered immediately and loudly. A wave of videos, articles, and influencers began celebrating a new kind of wealth, collecting experiences instead of collecting assets. Jason bought in completely. Weekend trips to new cities, a yearly international vacation he planned for months, nice dinners out with friends, framed as living in the moment rather than overspending. By 37, he has an incredible photo album and a passport packed with stamps. What he doesn't have is meaningful savings, any equity in property, or a retirement account that could survive more than a few rough years. Underneath the highlight reel sits a low hum of anxiety he tries to quiet by booking the next trip, which of course only feeds the same cycle. The trap here was never travel itself. Travel isn't the villain. The trap was using experiences as an emotional painkiller for financial stress, while an entire culture applauded him for it and called it enlightenment. Now shift to David, whose story unfolds far more quietly, one reasonable decision at a time. David entered the workforce right as dual-income households were becoming the norm, and he was determined to out-earn what his parents ever managed. He succeeded. Promotion after promotion, his salary climbed steadily for 2 decades. But here's the part nobody warns you about. Every single time his income jumped, his lifestyle quietly jumped right alongside it. A bigger car, a bigger house, private schooling for his kids, 2 international vacations a year instead of 1. Each purchase, taken alone, looked completely justified. He could afford it. That was the whole logic. This pattern has a name now: lifestyle creep. It's essentially the older generation's house obsession, rebranded in a sharp suit and a corner office. By the time David crossed 6 figures at 38, his spending had scaled up in perfect rhythm with his paycheck, which meant his actual savings rate never moved. Now at 51, retirement is only about a decade away, and the math is uncomfortably tight for someone who's earned a premium income for over 20 straight years. David didn't fail because he was reckless. He failed because he paid his monthly image of success in full, every single month, leaving almost nothing behind for his future self. And now, here's the moment worth sitting with for a second before we go any further. If you're being honest with yourself right now, which one of these 4 stories stung the most? Not the one that made you feel sorry for someone else. The one that made you a little uncomfortable, because some part of it looked familiar. Hold that thought, because by the end of this, you're going to need it. Let's finish with Daniel, because his story is the oldest version of this trap, and in some ways, the most tragic. Daniel grew up watching his parents rent for their entire lives, moving twice a decade, never once owning the walls around them. To him, buying a home wasn't just a financial decision, it was the ultimate proof that he had made it. The single clearest symbol of the American dream his generation was raised to chase. So when he landed a stable job in the early 1980s, he stretched his borrowing capacity to the absolute limit and bought a spacious house in a quiet suburb. On paper, it looked brilliant. Decades later, that same house is worth roughly 4 times what he paid for it. If you look only at his net worth, Daniel looks like he won at life. But that number is deeply misleading, because almost all of it is frozen inside 4 walls he can't spend, can't easily convert into monthly income, and can't use to pay for groceries or medical bills. His company pension quietly dissolved during a corporate restructuring back in the 90s, and what he has left in liquid savings is nowhere near enough to comfortably fund 25 more years of retirement. The house was never the mistake. Owning property is genuinely one of the smartest long-term moves available to most people. The mistake was believing the house was the entire plan, rather than just one piece of it. Daniel spent decades funding the outward symbol of wealth while quietly neglecting the liquid assets that were supposed to support it. So here's the pattern hiding underneath all 4 of these very different lives. A retiree who is asset-rich but painfully cash-poor. A sales director whose paycheck grows every year while his freedom stays frozen in place. A millennial substituting real wealth with a highlight reel of memories. And a 23-year-old investing responsibly while quietly funding the illusion of financial mastery online. 4 generations, 4 completely different economic realities, and the exact same underlying disease. Prioritizing the appearance of arrival over the actual substance of freedom. Breaking free from this requires one blunt decision, and it's simpler than it sounds, even if it's not easy. You have to deliberately look less wealthy than you actually could, so that your money is left alone long enough to compound. Every person who successfully escapes this trap, in every single era, does some version of the same thing. They drive the older car a little longer than feels comfortable. They live in the smaller home than their income technically allows. They ignore trending purchases that exist purely to be seen by other people. For Daniel, the fix would have meant diversifying far beyond his primary residence decades earlier, so his net worth wasn't locked entirely inside drywall and property taxes. For David, it means banking at least half of every future raise before his lifestyle gets the chance to claim it first. For Jason, it means redirecting a meaningful slice of his travel budget into simple, low-cost index funds, so his memories and his net worth can finally grow together instead of one replacing the other. And for Ethan, the fix isn't more financial knowledge. He already has plenty. It's aligning what he spends with what he says, letting his actual account balance become the thing he's proud of, rather than the aesthetic he performs for an audience. The rule underneath all of it never really changes. Assets come first, lifestyle comes second. Only once your investments can genuinely sustain your choices do you get to loosen that order a little. None of these four people failed because they were foolish or careless. They simply followed the unwritten social script their era handed them, word for word, without ever being told there was another option. They spent years optimizing for looking arrived, when the actual goal, the only one that ever mattered, was being free. So take an honest look at your own life for a second. Which version of this trap are you quietly living inside right now? Is it the frozen house, the creeping lifestyle upgrade, the endless chase for new experiences, or the polished online image that doesn't quite match your bank account? Drop your honest answer in the comments, because naming it is the first real step toward breaking it. And if this hit a little close to home, send it to the one person in your life who needs to hear this exact message today. Hit subscribe if you want more of these breakdowns, because there's a lot more of this pattern hiding in plain sight, and we're just getting started.